What if I told you that $11 million, yes, $11 million, vanished into thin air from the very foundation Prince Harry and Meghan Markle built to change the world? What if I told you that auditors are asking questions, insiders are whispering, and Meghan Markle is allegedly trembling behind the scenes because the Archewell Foundation isn't just in trouble, it might be imploding? At first glance, this sounds like the plot of a Netflix thriller. A royal couple walks away from the monarchy, builds a charity empire in California, amasses tens of millions in donations, corporate deals, and Hollywood favor, and then suddenly, poof, the money's gone. The mission stalls, the transparency crumbles, and all we're left with is a digital trail of confused donors, panicked staffers, and a mystery that grows more disturbing with every leaked document and every anonymous email. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But this isn't fiction. This is happening right now. And the question no one dares to ask out loud is this: where did the money go? This is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about power. It's about trust. And it's about the chilling unraveling of one of the most ambitious celebrity philanthropic ventures in modern history. The Archewell Foundation was launched with the kind of media fanfare most nonprofits can only dream of. But behind the photo ops and glossy mission statements, the reality may be far more tangled, far more dangerous, and far more personal than anyone expected. Because this isn't just a story about a foundation. It's a story about what happens when royalty tries to play the Hollywood game, and the Hollywood game plays back. And in the middle of it all, Meghan Markle, former actress, Duchess of Sussex, co-founder of Archewell, and now, allegedly, at the center of a financial scandal that could tarnish everything she's built. So how did we get here? Let's rewind the tape. The Archewell Foundation began with a promise. A big one. Meghan and Harry would take their fame, their global platform, and their outsider status, and turn it into action. They would build a new kind of nonprofit. Transparent, bold, compassionate. They even said it in their own words. We believe in the power of compassion to drive systemic cultural change. Millions of people believed them. Millions donated. But something changed. Over time, press releases got vaguer. Financial updates became delayed. Events were promised and then quietly canceled. Some grantees said they never received promised funds. And now, as of the latest filings, over $11 million raised for charitable causes appears unaccounted for or strangely redirected. Some insiders say the funds were reallocated. Others suggest the books were adjusted. But no one can, or will, say exactly where that money went. And here's the part that will stop you in your tracks. Multiple staffers reportedly quit over the last 12 months. A finance officer allegedly resigned citing ethical conflicts. A consultant warned that the foundation was operating in legal gray zones. And a bombshell allegation from a whistleblower claims that documents were shredded. Yes, shredded, just days before a scheduled audit. Still think this is about charity? Now, you might be wondering, why is this only becoming a story now? Why did no major outlets pick it up earlier? Why did everyone stay quiet, even when red flags were waving like a royal parade? Because Archewell was protected. By influence. By press connections. By the unspoken contract of celebrity. You don't bite the hand that feeds headlines. But that contract just snapped. An unsealed IRS document. A sudden withdrawal from a donor advisory firm. A rejected application for a matching grant due to transparency concerns. All these pieces started appearing in the past 90 days. And when you connect them, a very different picture of Archewell starts to emerge. One that is less noble and more strategic. Less about humanitarian aid and more about brand building. Less about helping others and more about protecting the Sussex legacy. But here's the twist. Meghan Markle didn't just build Archewell as a charity. She built it as a mirror to her own transformation. From actress to duchess to global changemaker. Archewell was supposed to be the proof of her evolution. The safe house from royal scrutiny. The legacy project she could control. But now, with numbers missing and reputations cracking, that mirror is starting to break. And what's reflecting back? Chaos. Confusion. Fear. Why did Archewell's chief financial officer abruptly resign last March? Why did Meghan and Harry cancel a planned trip to New York where a major Archewell announcement was expected? Why did their website remove certain impact reports from public view with no explanation? And perhaps most chilling of all, why is Meghan Markle herself now completely silent? Sources close to the foundation claim that Meghan has gone into full lockdown mode. That all interviews, appearances, and press events related to Archewell have been paused until further notice. That the couple's high-priced legal team has begun drafting new privacy clauses, and that crisis PR specialists have been brought in to prepare for reputational damage control. So we must ask, is this a temporary storm or the start of a total collapse? Because behind the polished Instagram posts and the cheerful website photos, there are real people who trusted Archewell, donors who gave hard-earned money, volunteers who worked without pay, and beneficiaries, often marginalized communities, who waited for aid that never came. This isn't just bad press. This could be devastating, and the silence is deafening. Where once Meghan gave passionate speeches about compassion, she now offers no explanation. Where Harry once spoke boldly about accountability, he now stays mute. The Archewell Foundation has become a black box, and no one knows what's going on inside. But in this exposé, we're opening that box. Because over the next few chapters, we're diving deep into leaked emails, into hidden tax filings, into explosive insider testimonies. You'll hear about the consultant who promised to clean up the books and allegedly made things worse. About the lawyer who quit mid-contract and left behind a cryptic warning. About the donor who's now demanding their money back through the courts. And we'll ask the one question no one else will. Was Archewell ever meant to succeed, or was it always a facade? You'll hear from people who were on the inside. You'll see documents that never made it to press. And you'll walk through the slow, unsettling transformation of Archewell from inspiration to instability. But first, let's take a look at the moment it all began to unravel. The moment the money started disappearing. The moment the press turned. The moment the image cracked. Because as you're about to see, the story of Archewell's downfall isn't just financial. It's personal. It's painful. And it's not over yet. In fact, it's just getting started. And what happens next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the biggest secret wasn't buried in some offshore account, but hiding in plain sight? That's the chilling question at the heart of this unraveling story. Because when $11 million mysteriously disappears from a globally hyped charity co-founded by two of the most talked-about public figures in the world, and no one seems to know where it went, we are forced to ask, was this mismanagement, manipulation, or something far worse? Let's start with a simple truth. Money leaves a trail. Always. Or at least, it should. So why is it that when investigators, watchdogs, and even some media outlets began asking for a transparent breakdown of Archewell Foundation's incoming donations and outgoing grants, they ran into silence, redirection, and confusion? We're not talking about small inconsistencies here. This isn't some misplaced invoice or a typo in a financial report. This is millions of dollars, raised under the noble banner of compassion, community building, and global healing, that have effectively vanished into the fog. And the question that keeps getting whispered louder and louder across boardrooms, nonprofits, and social media alike is this. Where did the money go? Let's break it down, because the numbers tell a story, even when no one else will. According to the initial reports released in Archewell's first years of operation, the foundation had raised well over $13 million in charitable contributions between 2021 and 2022. Public enthusiasm was high. Royal watchers, celebrity donors, corporate sponsors, and average citizens were excited to support a cause that promised to bring modern solutions to age-old social problems. Education, mental health, vaccine equity, women's empowerment. The buzzwords were all there. And for a while, it seemed like Archewell was delivering. But then came the 2023 filings. Instead of progress, the documents showed a dramatic downturn. Revenue plummeted to less than $2 million. And yet, somehow, over $11 million in reported funds that had previously been listed as part of Archewell's total assets were now gone. No detailed breakdown of how the funds were spent. No press release to explain the sudden disappearance. No accountability trail to show where the money had been distributed. Just a note, buried in a 990 form, marked grant disbursements and operational adjustments. And just like that, Millions of dollars had vanished behind a wall of vague terminology. But here's where it gets weirder. According to multiple sources, including two former Archewell contractors who spoke under condition of anonymity, some of the projects the foundation claimed to fund never actually materialized. One source described a wellness initiative meant to launch in underserved U.S. communities. It was slated to include mental health workshops, trauma-informed educators, and on-the-ground resource centers. It never got past the planning stage, the source said. We were told to hold off indefinitely, but Archewell still listed it as a completed grant project in one of their quarterly updates. That shocked me. Another source claimed that a large chunk of foundation funds had been funneled into internal restructuring, with a significant percentage allegedly going to a third-party firm described only as a strategic advisory partner. Guess who allegedly approved that contract? According to internal messages seen by investigative reporters, Meghan Markle herself. So now, we're left with a haunting contradiction. A foundation meant to lift up communities may have instead been quietly bleeding funds to consultants, image managers, and internal brand strategists, all while the public was told that Archewell was making a global impact. And then came the collapse. By mid-2024, whispers began circling the nonprofit sector. Something was off with Archewell's books. A whistleblower, an assistant financial coordinator, allegedly alerted the Charity Commission in the UK to possible irregularities in cross-border grant reporting. The claim? Archewell was reporting one set of numbers in the US and another in the UK, and the two didn't match. Still, no public investigation was launched. No headlines. Just more silence. Until something strange happened. A prominent California-based donor advisory group, known for working with celebrity foundations, abruptly pulled out of a planned partnership with Archewell. No public explanation. No farewell announcement. Just gone. When asked by a journalist why the partnership collapsed, one executive cryptically replied, "We didn't feel the level of transparency was up to our standards." That one sentence triggered a domino effect. Suddenly, reporters who had been previously hesitant to dig into Archewell's financials began poking around. What they found was deeply unsettling. Let's talk numbers for a moment. Stay with me, because this part matters. Archewell publicly stated they had distributed $3 million in grants to various organizations. But several of the listed recipients have either not confirmed receiving the full amounts or have refused to comment altogether. One education nonprofit allegedly listed by Archewell denied any official partnership, saying, "We never signed an MOU. We had discussions, but nothing formal ever happened." Another group, a mental health initiative based in Canada, said they were surprised to see their name on Archewell's public roster of grantees, as they never received any financial disbursement. How can that be? How can you list projects and partners that didn't actually happen and not expect questions? Unless the assumption was that no one would dig deep enough to find out. Now let's talk about the human cost. One particularly heartbreaking case involves a grassroots community group in South Los Angeles. They were reportedly promised funding through an Archewell-backed initiative focused on reducing food insecurity. Volunteers began prepping the project. Local families were told help was coming. That funding never arrived. To this day, the group hasn't received an explanation. And that brings us to a crucial question we have to ask ourselves right now. Was this deliberate deceit or just catastrophic mismanagement? Because either scenario is devastating. And here's where things take an even darker turn. An email, allegedly leaked from within the foundation, shows a senior staffer warning about financial exposure and potential reputational blowback as early as March 2023. The email was addressed to both Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. The subject line? Urgent, financial reporting gaps plus grant discrepancies. According to someone close to the situation, Meghan never replied directly. But hours after that email was sent, the staffer was allegedly told their role was being reevaluated. They quietly resigned weeks later. So what was the Sussex strategy? Control the narrative, limit disclosures, and above all, project confidence. And for a while, it worked. The mainstream press didn't press hard. Royal fans still defended the cause. Critics were dismissed as trolls. But behind closed doors, panic was mounting. A source with ties to Archewell's operations described the Montecito headquarters as paralyzed. Every day, someone was asking, What's the plan if this goes public? And there was no plan, they said. There was only Meghan's belief that if they stayed quiet, the story would die. But the story didn't die. It grew. Because when you mix royal fame, Hollywood spin, missing millions, and silence from those at the top, you don't get closure. You get a ticking bomb. And now that bomb is getting louder. More donors are demanding answers. Financial watchdogs are circling. And multiple journalists are reportedly preparing long-form investigative reports into Archewell's operations. One source close to a major UK publication put it bluntly. The gloves are off. Archewell isn't a fairy tale anymore. It's a scandal waiting to explode. And if you think this is where the trail ends, you're wrong. Because buried deep within a separate tax document, filed not under Archewell's name, but under a consulting agency linked to one of Meghan's close advisors, is a six-figure payout categorized as brand alignment services. No explanation, no details, no clear link to charity. Just one line, one payment, and one chilling possibility. Was Archewell being used as a funnel for Meghan's personal branding empire? Now that question alone could spark headlines for months. But it's not just one question. It's dozens. And they all lead to the same truth. Something is very, very wrong inside Archewell. But if you thought the financial fog was shocking, wait until you see what happened next. Because the silence from Meghan's team didn't just confuse donors. It infuriated staff, and one of them decided to speak. What happens when the IRS takes a closer look at your charity, and what they find doesn't match the story you've been telling the world? That's the moment Archewell stopped being a feel-good philanthropic project and became a case study in financial confusion, unanswered questions, and regulatory red flags. And if Chapter 1 opened the door to the mystery, then Chapter 2 walks straight into the basement, where the documents are kept, the numbers start talking, and the truth becomes harder to spin. Let's begin with a question that should send chills down anyone's spine. Why would a charity backed by royal celebrity, managed by seasoned professionals, and funded by millions of dollars, file documents with the IRS that look like a puzzle with half the pieces missing? The IRS Form 990 is not glamorous. It's not a PR video. It's not a staged podcast speech or a polished Archewell announcement. It is pure, unfiltered financial reality, written in black and white government ink. And unlike Instagram posts, you can't delete it, revise it, or explain it away with inspirational quotes. So when the 990 filings for Archewell landed publicly, accountants and watchdog groups immediately noticed something strange. Really strange. Let's break down exactly what they saw. First, income. Archewell's reported contributions dropped to shockingly low numbers, under $2 million, despite the foundation previously announcing substantial fundraising partnerships. A charity's income can fluctuate, yes, but not like this. Not this drastically. Not this inexplicably. Next, expenses. There were large payments categorized under vague terms like consulting, strategic development, and administrative support. Normally, a charity separates its spending into clear categories: grants, salaries, program expansion, operational costs. But Archewell's filings blurred those lines to the point where watchdog organizations couldn't tell what was going where. Then, the grants. This is where the real trouble started. According to the IRS filings, Archewell Foundation allegedly distributed thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, in grants to listed organizations. But as we revealed earlier, at least 3 of those organizations either denied receiving the amounts reported or denied receiving anything at all. Imagine reading that your charity supposedly gave you $200,000 that never arrived. Imagine being a donor who believed your contribution went to children, families, or communities, only to discover the grant never reached its intended recipient. Now, imagine being Meghan Markle, and knowing the IRS already has the paperwork in its hands. But the biggest shock in the filings wasn't the missing money. It was the category labeled Other Expenses, a category that totaled more than $1,150,000. And what was inside that category? No breakdown, no explanation, just a number. A massive number. Now ask yourself, how does a high-profile charity report over $1 million under Other and expect no one to ask questions? But the IRS does ask questions, and they expect answers. The filings also revealed inconsistencies between Archewell's public claims and financial reality. For months, Archewell's website celebrated completed initiatives, international partnerships, and major charitable milestones. Yet, the filings didn't support some of those claims. Several listed initiatives had no corresponding expenses or grant entries. Others seemed inflated or mismatched. One former charity regulator said privately, "It's not illegal to make mistakes on a Form 990, but the number of inconsistencies here raises eyebrows. High ones." Let's move deeper. In the most damning section of the IRS paperwork, Archewell listed a large decrease in assets, millions gone from one year to the next, and failed to give a detailed itemization of how those assets were spent or moved. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't rounding. This was eight-figure financial shrinkage. And when journalists contacted Archewell for comment, the response was silence. Not even a "we're reviewing the filings." Not even a "we stand by our work." Just nothing. But silence creates a vacuum, and rumors rush to fill it. One such rumor circulated inside nonprofit networks, that Archewell's finance department had allegedly been urged to streamline reporting to avoid public backlash. Another rumor, even darker, suggested that an outside consultancy brought in by Meghan had given advice about creative accounting strategies commonly used in the entertainment industry, but not acceptable for a registered nonprofit. Remember, charity law is strict. Intent matters. Clarity matters. Consistency matters. If a charity cannot clearly show how and where its money moved, it risks audits, fines, litigation, and even dissolution. But let's not forget the human emotion behind these documents. Imagine being a staff member who joined Archewell to make a difference, only to see the foundation's legacy threatened by unclear numbers and potential regulatory scrutiny. One former employee allegedly said in a private message, "We warned them. We told them the filings didn't look right. We were ignored." Another said, "Meghan wanted everything to look big, global, impactful. But the numbers weren't matching the story." And then, this is crucial, the auditors walked out. You heard that right. A contracted auditing firm allegedly halted their work on Archewell mid-review, citing discrepancies in documented expenditures. That is almost unheard of in the nonprofit world. Auditors don't just walk away unless something is seriously wrong. What kind of discrepancies would cause a professional audit team to back out? Errors, missing documents, contradictory financial reports, or something more alarming, like transactions that couldn't be justified? One insider claimed that when the audit team asked for supporting documentation for 5 specific six-figure expenditures, the foundation was unable to produce adequate receipts or explanations. Unable to produce receipts. For a charity, this is the stuff regulators salivate over. And that brings us to the question no one wants to ask, but everyone is thinking. Did Archewell's financial collapse begin as a mistake or a pattern? Now, let's consider the timing. The filings showing missing funds appeared not long after Archewell removed several staff members, paused multiple initiatives, and quietly restructured its leadership team. Meghan and Harry were simultaneously pushing new media projects, a docuseries, a rebranding strategy, and rumored book deals. Some critics argue the foundation was treated less like a nonprofit and more like a publicity engine. Others believe Meghan and Harry were stretched too thin, trying to maintain a global brand while running a complex philanthropic organization. Either way, the IRS filings revealed one undeniable truth. Archewell was not functioning like a healthy, transparent, well-managed charity. And that reality sent shockwaves through the entire nonprofit sector. One charity watchdog group released a statement, without naming Archewell directly, that warned donors to exercise caution when supporting organizations that do not provide detailed expenditure breakdowns. Another nonprofit advisor said, "You cannot run a foundation like a celebrity brand. The IRS doesn't care about PR. They care about accuracy." But the most dramatic reaction came from donors. Some began requesting financial statements. Some demanded refunds. Some threatened to sue. And according to sources, at least one donor, someone with considerable influence, has already filed a formal inquiry requesting an independent review of Archewell's finances. Now imagine being Meghan Markle reading that news alert. Imagine the panic, the scrambling, the desperate phone calls at midnight. Because the IRS filings didn't just raise questions. They cast a shadow, a long, dark one. And nothing, no glamorous relaunch, no curated interview, no commercial deals, can overshadow government paperwork that suggests missing money, operational confusion, and questionable accounting. But here's where the story twists again. As shocking as the IRS filings were, they were only the beginning. Because hidden inside those same documents, barely noticed at first, was a trail. A breadcrumb trail of transactions that didn't just look questionable, they looked deliberate. Patterns of spending that repeated. Payments routed through specific partners. Expense categories that grew mysteriously large over short periods. And when investigators followed that trail, what they found didn't lead to a community program or a charity partner. It led to a consultant. A consultant whose name we're about to hear again. A consultant whose influence stretched through every corner of Archewell's financial decisions. A consultant whose arrival marked the turning point in Archewell's decline. And when that consultant stepped in, everything changed. Because the next chapter of this story isn't about accounting. It's about power, control, and the person Meghan allegedly trusted to fix the foundation, but who may have broken it instead. And that's where we're heading next. Because if you thought missing millions and suspicious filings were shocking, wait until you meet the shadow consultant. He is the key to the whole story. And what comes next will change everything. And no one saw it coming. He came in quietly. No headlines. No official announcement. Just a signature on a contract and a whisper through the halls of Archewell. A consultant, they said. An expert. Someone who could fix the growing mess beneath the surface. Someone who could restructure the finances, streamline the brand, and keep Meghan's vision alive. But as we're about to uncover, that consultant didn't just revise a few spreadsheets. He reshaped the very soul of Archewell. And in doing so, he forced Meghan Markle into the most devastating contradiction of her public life. Because this chapter isn't just about numbers. It's about narrative. And the woman who once told the world that compassion could change everything suddenly found herself at war with the very structure she helped create. Let's rewind. When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry launched Archewell, it wasn't just another celebrity nonprofit. It was positioned as a movement, a new kind of charity. Bold, fresh, modern. Something that would finally bring transparency and style to the dusty old world of philanthropy. Impact-driven, they said. Mission-led. Reimagining how we give. The Archewell website was sleek. The copywriting was aspirational. The mission statement had all the hallmarks of a Silicon Valley startup meets social justice hybrid. And Meghan? She was its North Star. In every video, every statement, every headline, she stood front and center. The elegant voice of reason. The architect of the foundation's core values. But here's the contradiction. Meghan's vision was big on heart and light on logistics. According to multiple sources close to the early foundation team, Meghan was deeply involved in the branding of Archewell. She personally approved the name. She co-wrote the messaging. She even weighed in on logo colors. What she wasn't as involved in. The numbers. The systems. The governance. That's where things started to fracture. According to one ex-employee, there was an early internal meeting in which Meghan passionately outlined her dream for Archewell. She wanted media projects, community centers, wellness programs, educational initiatives, tech innovation, and large-scale global impact. And we all nodded, the staffer recalled. But in the back of our minds, we were thinking, where's the infrastructure for all this? The answer? There wasn't one. Archewell was born with a vision that outpaced its architecture. And when the cracks started to show, missing receipts, missed deadlines, grants promised but never delivered, that's when he was brought in. The consultant, a shadowy figure in the story of Archewell's collapse. Not a public face, but a powerful force. According to leaked internal emails and verified third-party reports, Meghan and Harry were advised to bring in an external consultant in early 2023 to help restructure Archewell's financial model. The consultant, whose background allegedly included private equity and Hollywood brand consulting, wasn't a nonprofit expert, but he was a specialist in narrative rescue. His pitch was simple. Clean up the books, repackage the messaging, and shift Archewell from a charitable operation to a philanthropic media hub, less donation-focused, more project-driven. In short, rebuild the brand around Meghan. Some insiders say this was exactly what Meghan wanted. A tighter narrative, more control, less risk. Others claim she was reluctant, torn between her desire to maintain the foundation's mission and her growing fear that Archewell's flaws could blow up in the press. She believed in the work, one source said, but she also wanted to protect her image. And the consultant offered her a way to do both, on paper. But it came at a price. Almost immediately, the foundation's priorities shifted. Grant programs were paused. Direct outreach efforts stalled. Spending on third-party strategic services skyrocketed. Instead of channeling money toward communities, Archewell began funneling funds into media development, brand management, and internal repositioning. The lines between charity and self-promotion blurred fast. One example, Archewell reportedly paid a six-figure sum to a branding firm to align the foundation's messaging with contemporary cultural values, at a time when its direct charitable giving had sharply declined. Another, a rumored Archewell-backed mental health campaign was quietly shelved, just weeks after Meghan signed a separate commercial deal with a wellness brand that appeared to target the same demographic. It didn't go unnoticed. Donors started asking questions. So did the media. And Meghan? She began pulling back. Multiple insiders say that around this time, Meghan became obsessed with controlling the public perception of Archewell. She reviewed press releases personally. She delayed the release of financial summaries. She allegedly ordered staff to remove certain partnerships from the website if they couldn't be properly visualized. The fear was no longer about failing to help people. The fear was about failing to look good helping people. And that's when the contradictions became too big to ignore. Because while Meghan continued to speak about compassion and global uplift, the foundation's own paperwork showed a different story, one of stalled projects, disappearing grants, and a staggering shift in how the money was being spent. One former staffer put it this way: Archewell started as a charity. Then it became a brand. Then it became a shield. But a shield against what? The answer might lie in the emails. A confidential thread, allegedly leaked by a departing finance team member, shows internal discussions about mitigating reputational exposure and restructuring asset disclosures. In one message, a senior team member suggests reclassifying certain expenses under broader headings to protect the integrity of the narrative. In plain terms, making the books look cleaner than they were. Whether or not Meghan directly approved those changes is unclear. But what is clear is that she was intimately involved in every public-facing decision made at Archewell, which means if she didn't know, she should have. And the damage didn't stop at numbers. As the foundation became more tightly controlled, staff morale plummeted. Several key team members exited quietly. One public engagement director, who had been with Archewell since the beginning, reportedly left after voicing concerns over the foundation's mission drift. A parting quote from their resignation letter allegedly read, "This isn't what I signed up for. We're not helping people anymore. We're curating image." That statement stung, because it captured what so many supporters feared was happening. That behind the scenes, the compassionate Duchess had become the brand manager. That the woman who inspired millions to rethink royalty had become entangled in the same kind of control and secrecy she once escaped from the palace to avoid. Meghan was no longer just the visionary. She was now the gatekeeper, the decision-maker, and, whether she liked it or not, the one tied to every financial misstep Archewell made. So the contradiction deepened. The same woman who once sued tabloids for intruding on her privacy was now allegedly funding privacy consultants with donor money. The same woman who spoke about transparency was now releasing curated updates with no hard numbers. The same woman who promised action was now stalling investigations behind silence. And all the while, the public was watching, waiting, whispering, because you can only talk about compassion for so long before people ask, where's the impact? And the moment that question gains momentum, the whole narrative begins to crumble. Which brings us to the final twist in this chapter. According to a former Archewell employee who recently broke their NDA, Meghan was advised by the consultant to distance herself from the foundation publicly until the numbers were cleaned up. That's right. Meghan Markle, the very heartbeat of Archewell, was advised to go silent. And she did. No major Archewell media appearances. No fundraising appeals. No impact interviews. No financial breakdowns. Just stillness. For someone as media-savvy and camera-ready as Meghan, this silence was deafening. And the timing, right after the IRS filings, right after donor inquiries, right after internal panic. Was telling. Was this damage control? Legal advice? A warning from advisors to lay low? Or was it fear? Fear that if she spoke, she'd be forced to admit that the vision she sold to the world had spiraled out of control, that the brand had overtaken the mission, that Archewell, in trying to be everything, had become nothing. And that fear? It didn't stay hidden for long. Because while Meghan tried to stay quiet, someone else didn't. Someone inside Archewell who had seen too much, who had watched too many promises dissolve, who had stayed silent for too long. And that person? They blew the whistle. He wasn't a household name. He didn't pose for pictures. He wasn't listed on Archewell's leadership page. And yet, when the foundation began to unravel, his fingerprints were everywhere. The man insiders now call the shadow consultant didn't just advise Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. He engineered the strategy that would redefine Archewell from a floundering nonprofit into a controlled messaging machine. But here's the kicker. According to insiders, he may have also played a key role in how the money was spent, reclassified, and, some allege, quietly redirected. So who is he? Where did he come from? And how did one man gain so much control over a foundation built on royal credibility and global compassion? Let's pull back the curtain. The man's name has not been publicly confirmed, but multiple sources describe him as a high-powered branding and restructuring expert, with ties to Hollywood finance firms and major Silicon Valley investors. Notably, he's never run a nonprofit. But what he has done, repeatedly, is turn around celebrity-led ventures that are overexposed, underperforming, and on the brink of collapse. Sound familiar? By early 2023, Archewell was all three. Donor engagement was down. Public scrutiny was rising. Staff were leaving. Financials were a mess. Meghan was desperate to maintain control of the narrative without stepping directly into a crisis management role. And Harry, according to one insider, was growing increasingly disengaged. That's when this consultant allegedly entered the picture. He was recommended by a Hollywood contact who had previously worked with Meghan during her Suits era. His reputation? Efficient, ruthless, private. He doesn't make waves. He makes people disappear from problems. The pitch to Meghan and Harry, according to those with knowledge of the meeting, was simple. Archewell needs a reset. You can't keep doing what you're doing. Let me handle the back end. You focus on the front-facing brand. For a while, it seemed like a perfect solution. Meghan would retain the spotlight. Harry would step back. The foundation would get a financial detox. But very quickly, something shifted. Multiple sources recall a string of sudden terminations within weeks of the consultant's arrival. Long-standing staffers were let go. Certain external partnerships were dissolved. 2 internal departments were reportedly folded into one, and oversight was concentrated in the consultant's hands. He began approving disbursements. He rewrote internal protocols. He allegedly signed off on budgetary reclassifications with limited board review. One former staffer said, "It was like watching someone flip a switch. We weren't a charity anymore. We were a production company with a conscience." And that's when the spending patterns began to change. Instead of funds flowing to community organizations and charitable initiatives, they started heading toward strategic storytelling projects. A 6-month contract with a digital media firm to shape the Archewell identity. A recurring retainer for a cultural alignment consultant. Payments to a production house reportedly developing branded mini-documentaries. Even more puzzling were the lump sum payments listed as external partner development. No descriptions. No recipients named. The money went out, but no one could say where it landed. And through it all, the consultant remained invisible. He didn't attend public events. He didn't take calls from donors. He didn't have an official title, but every major decision passed through him. One insider described a chilling moment during a financial review meeting. "We brought up a grant that had been promised to a women's shelter. The consultant interrupted and said, 'We don't need optics like that right now. We need scalable PR wins.' That's when I knew. Archewell wasn't about helping anymore. Think about that for a second. A consultant telling a charity to delay giving money to a shelter because it wouldn't deliver the right scalable PR win. Now ask yourself, what kind of charity does that? Or better yet, what kind of charity hires someone who thinks like that? This wasn't about ethics. It was about image. And Archewell's image was slipping fast. So the consultant got bolder. According to leaked documents reviewed by journalists, He proposed a complete restructuring of Archewell's public communications. His plan? Cancel low-visibility grant programs. Shift financial spending toward media production. Increase behind-the-scenes brand protection work coded in budgets under operations. Encourage Meghan and Harry to distance themselves from direct charitable oversight. That fourth point. It's what reportedly caused an internal schism. Sources say Meghan initially resisted. She didn't want to abandon the cause. She just wanted it to look controlled, said one ex-staffer. But by the time the IRS filings went public, it was too late. The consultant's fingerprints were on every major shift, every reallocation, every disappearing dollar. And yet, he wasn't on any payroll document released to the public. How is that possible? Through shell companies, third-party partnerships, and private contractor clauses. One financial expert who reviewed the filings said, "It's a classic obfuscation tactic. Legal? Maybe. Ethical? Absolutely not. Especially for a nonprofit." And here's where the plot turns from strategic to sinister. An anonymous whistleblower, who we'll explore more in the next chapter, claims they saw internal emails in which the consultant instructed staff to sanitize documentation before handing anything over to auditors or journalists. The phrase sanitize documentation isn't just bureaucratic jargon. It's code for covering tracks. And when one junior financial officer allegedly pushed back, they were told their contract was under review. They were let go 2 weeks later. But before they left, they copied everything. Emails, contracts, financial transfers, internal memos, and they handed it all to someone outside the organization. We don't yet know what's in those files. But according to sources who've seen fragments, the documents suggest the consultant wasn't just managing Archewell, he was redirecting it. One payment trail allegedly led to a firm in Dubai. Another showed a consulting fee routed through a Los Angeles media incubator tied to a producer who worked with Meghan on her now-defunct Spotify podcast. Another raised eyebrows by referencing performance bonuses tied to brand engagement metrics, language that has no place in a 501c3 charity. And all of it links back to this one man. No face, no job title, just a web of decisions that led to the slow, quiet dismantling of a public trust. Now imagine being Meghan Markle. You hired a man to help you manage a crisis. He promised control. He promised discretion. He promised transformation. But what he may have delivered was obliteration. Because Archewell isn't just collapsing under public scrutiny. It's hemorrhaging credibility. It's becoming a ghost ship, empty promises, vague statements, and unpaid impact. And behind it all, a consultant who walked into the building with no fanfare and may walk out of it with no consequences. Unless someone stops him. Unless someone exposes what really happened. And just as that realization started to sink in, someone inside Archewell snapped. They had the documents. They had the emails. They had the voice notes. And they weren't going to be silent anymore. Because when you watch something you love get corrupted, you either walk away or you fight back. And this person? They chose to blow the whistle. It started with a closed-door meeting. No cameras. No media. No palace advisors. Just Archewell's core leadership team, a few junior staffers, and Meghan Markle herself. What happened inside that Montecito boardroom on a warm Tuesday morning in late 2024 would change everything. Because that meeting didn't just mark a turning point. It was the implosion point. This was the moment the dream cracked. And behind Archewell's manicured branding and heartwarming Instagram posts, the shouting began. Let's set the scene. The Archewell Foundation had been under quiet siege for months. The IRS filings had raised red flags. Donors were whispering. Projects were stalling. Staff morale was cratering. The mysterious consultant had taken control of internal operations, and Meghan's appearances had grown sparse and eerily scripted. But on this day, insiders say Meghan decided to take charge again. She was reportedly tired of silence, tired of the narrative slipping, and tired of seeing her carefully crafted vision reduced to financial chaos in the headlines. According to two former staffers, Meghan called the meeting with one goal: to get everyone back on message. But that's not what happened, because what she walked into wasn't a misaligned team in need of guidance. It was a ticking time bomb. The Montecito office had become a pressure cooker, filled with resentment, paranoia, and rising fear. Junior staffers were terrified they'd be blamed. Mid-level managers were exhausted from spinning statements that made no sense. Senior leadership? Divided. Half were loyal to Meghan's vision. The other half? Reportedly loyal to the consultant who'd promised institutional protection and reputation insulation in the face of external investigations. So when Meghan entered that boardroom with her signature notebook, a few sharp talking points, and a plan to reignite the mission, she wasn't met with applause. She was met with silence. Tight-lipped faces, folded arms, eyes darting to the floor. That's when, according to an insider who was present, it exploded. One staffer, a senior project coordinator who had been with Archewell since the early days, stood up and asked, "Before we talk about messaging, can we address the fact that no one knows where half the budget went?" Another added, "We've spent more on rebranding this year than on actual charitable work. How are we supposed to justify that?" Meghan, visibly shaken, reportedly tried to steer the conversation back toward future initiatives, but the room had turned. A third voice chimed in. "We've had grants pulled without explanation. We've had promised funding disappear. Our partners are calling us liars." And then came the line that reportedly made Meghan go cold. "Are we still a charity? Or are we just a media lab for your brand?" The source says Meghan's face froze. Not angry, not defensive, just frozen. And that's when the shouting began. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, fingers pointed. Some staff accused Meghan of retreating when things got tough. Others accused the consultant of silencing criticism and operating behind closed doors. And through it all, according to one attendee, Meghan barely spoke. She sat, stone-faced, gripping her notebook, blinking slowly. It was like the entire house she built was on fire, and she was still deciding whether to grab a hose or the photos on the wall. One former executive director said, "People wanted her to fight for Archewell. Instead, she seemed removed. Like the Meghan we knew was gone. Replaced by someone managing her legacy, not leading her team." It was at this moment that someone reportedly slammed a stack of paper on the table. It was a printout, a spreadsheet, a line-by-line breakdown of financial inconsistencies. The numbers didn't lie. Grants that were promised but not paid. Consulting fees that didn't match contracts. Initiatives listed as complete, with no proof of execution. That document, sources say, was compiled by a small group of internal staffers. Secretly, over the course of months. They were tired of the gaslighting, tired of the vagueness, tired of being told to trust the process while donors asked impossible questions. And with that spreadsheet on the table, the meltdown was complete. One by one, staffers began speaking up, some choked up with emotion, recalling the hopes they had when they joined Archewell. Others expressed rage at being used for image management instead of impact. One staffer, in tears, reportedly said, "I told my family I was changing the world. All I've done is help bury receipts." And through it all, Meghan didn't deny it. According to multiple sources, she didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She just listened. For hours. And when it was over, she stood up, straightened her blazer, and said only this: "We'll regroup tomorrow." There was no tomorrow. By the following week, 3 senior staffers had resigned. The consultant had reportedly suspended external communications. Meghan and Harry's media team issued a vague press release about internal restructuring to support future growth. But the damage was done. That spreadsheet? It found its way to a journalist. And not just any journalist. A Bulldog reporter with a long history of dismantling celebrity-driven nonprofits. And that reporter started making calls. Suddenly, Archewell wasn't just a PR question. It was a story. One with allegations, documents, and rising public interest. One with a paper trail. One with a growing whisper. Was Archewell under internal investigation? Meanwhile, Meghan retreated further. Her calendar cleared. Appearances were canceled. Her spokesperson declined interviews. Harry? He was reportedly concerned but distracted by other projects. And the consultant? Vanished. Phone off. Office closed. Contracts allegedly transferred to a third-party shell. It was like a cleanup crew had swept through Montecito overnight. But the meltdown couldn't be undone. That Tuesday meeting had lit a fuse, and the bomb was already ticking. And here's the twist that no one saw coming. One of the departing staffers didn't just walk away. They walked straight into the office of an attorney. A very specific kind of attorney. the kind who specializes in whistleblower protection laws. And what they brought with them? A flash drive, hundreds of internal documents, dozens of voice recordings, screenshots, meeting notes, and an email thread marked legal risk, high priority. This wasn't just a resignation. It was the start of a revelation. Because while the Montecito meltdown may have ended in silence, the next chapter would begin with a voice no one expected. The first red folder landed on a desk in Sacramento. The second landed in Washington, D.C. And the third? That one made its way directly to the inbox of a senior investigator at the California Attorney General's office, flagged as urgent, accompanied by a subject line that read, "Whistleblower evidence, Archewell Foundation compliance breach." Within 48 hours, phones began ringing. Within 72 hours, Archewell's legal team was scrambling. And within 1 week, the story Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had worked so carefully to curate for nearly 4 years was under legal review. Because the meltdown in Montecito wasn't just a dramatic office implosion. It was the match that lit the fuse of something far more dangerous. A potential legal reckoning that could unravel Archewell and possibly implicate its founders in what some experts now call one of the most public charity crises of the decade. Let's step back and break this down. In the United States, any 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization is bound by strict legal requirements. Transparency, accurate financial reporting, grant disbursement verification, prohibited use of charitable funds for personal gain. Violations of these rules aren't just PR scandals. They're criminal liabilities. The minute a whistleblower files a formal complaint with supporting documentation, the law requires state officials to investigate. And that's exactly what happened. According to sources inside California's Department of Justice, the whistleblower from Archewell submitted a complete evidentiary packet. Hundreds of files, dozens of statements, financial anomalies, emails, recorded conversations, even unreleased internal budgets allegedly showing discrepancies between what Archewell reported publicly and what it actually spent. Some documents were marked confidential. Others were labeled draft, not for auditors. Several showed amounts marked for reallocation with no attached explanation. And that was enough. Enough to trigger a preliminary review. This review, while not a full-scale investigation, yet, is the first legal domino. It means lawyers, accountants, and forensic analysts are now combing through every page Archewell has submitted to the IRS, the California Charity Registry, and its own donors. And what they're reportedly finding isn't pretty. Let's talk about potential violations. First, misuse of charitable funds. The whistleblower's documents reportedly include transactions categorized as consultant development support that were later reclassified as impact delivery. This isn't just sloppy accounting. If proven deliberate, it's fraud. Second, failure to deliver promised grants. Archewell publicly listed at least 5 charitable initiatives in their annual reports, but at least 2 of those have been confirmed as non-existent. That's not just misleading. It could be grounds for deceptive fundraising practices, another legal red flag. Third, improper personal benefit. One document shows foundation funds allegedly being used to pay for a team retreat in Santa Barbara, complete with 5-star catering, private security, and spa services. The event, internally listed as a wellness strategy summit, was reportedly attended only by Meghan's personal PR team and the shadow consultant. If Archewell funds were used for that, it's not just unethical. It's illegal. According to a former IRS charity compliance agent, if even 10% of what we're hearing is accurate, they're looking at serious penalties, possibly even revocation of nonprofit status. But that's not even the worst part, because buried in the documents submitted by the whistleblower is one line that could shift this entire situation from scandal to crisis. An internal memo, dated April 2024, allegedly reads, "We recommend restructuring expenses before next IRS review." Narrative alignment should guide reporting classifications. Let that sink in. Narrative alignment, not accuracy, not legality, not financial transparency. This isn't a suggestion from an intern. It's reportedly from a high-ranking Archewell strategy executive, one of Meghan's trusted lieutenants. That one sentence could be interpreted as intent to deceive. And intent is everything in court. Now, let's talk about Archewell's legal team. At first, they did what all crisis lawyers do: deny, delay, deflect. They issued a short statement. Archewell remains committed to transparency, compliance, and impact. We have not been formally contacted by any agency and will cooperate fully with all inquiries. But behind the scenes, it was chaos. Sources close to the firm representing Archewell say that as soon as word spread of the whistleblower's filing, the Sussex legal team launched an emergency review. Staff were ordered to preserve communications. Advisors were told to stop issuing public statements. Internal communication systems were locked down to prevent leaks. And Meghan? According to one well-placed insider, she was shattered. She couldn't believe it had come to this. She thought this was all fixable, just another PR hiccup. But once the word fraud was used in a legal context, everything changed. Harry, by contrast, was reportedly furious. Furious that someone inside the organization would betray them. Furious that lawyers hadn't flagged the financial red flags earlier. And most of all, furious that Archewell's collapse was now being linked to his name, his title, and his family legacy. Remember, Harry is still technically a prince. And while he's no longer a working royal, the optics of a royal-linked charity facing legal scrutiny in the U.S. Catastrophic. Back in London, insiders say the palace was watching very closely. One senior royal aide reportedly told a journalist, "This is precisely why the Sussexes were advised to keep their public ventures separate from charitable entities. The reputational risk is immense. And let's not forget, Archewell isn't just a foundation. It's tied to multiple Sussex ventures, their media company, their documentaries, even Meghan's rumored lifestyle brand. If Archewell loses its nonprofit status, or worse, faces civil or criminal penalties, the fallout could extend across every corner of their business empire. But wait, there's more. Because just as Archewell's legal team was preparing a response to the whistleblower complaint, another shoe dropped. A second whistleblower came forward. This time, not from inside Archewell, but from one of its external partners. This partner, according to sources, had handled logistics for one of Archewell's short-lived initiatives. Their complaint? That they were instructed to inflate engagement metrics and backdate impact reports to align with Archewell's press statements. When asked to explain the request, they were told it came from the consultant. Now, it's not just internal staff alleging manipulation, it's outside vendors.